Hello and welcome to this week's IG Live. Today we are going to be talking to author Melanie Florence, and many of you are familiar with her because of her picture books, but she's also written a number of wonderful books for older kids. In fact, I have to say, I just finished reading last night Just Lucky, which is now one of my new favorite books. It is wonderful. I couldn't put it down. So for those of you who only know her through her picture books, I really recommend you try some of her books for older kids. But we're going to be talking about how sometimes she's not seen as kind of a traditional author and how kids respond to her about that, but also how her books can give a more realistic, maybe a fuller view. So she's getting on here for us right now. Remember, we do this every week, usually at 2 o'clock Eastern, which is 11 o'clock Pacific here in California with me. Hello, welcome.
Hi.
Hi, so good to talk with you today. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Well, why don't we dive right in? I was talking just a little bit about how a lot of us know you more for your picture books, which of course have won so many awards, but you've written some amazing books for older kids. I didn't know them as well, so I just finished reading Just Lucky, which I loved. It was such a page turner. Yeah, but why don't we back up and talk a little bit about what was your journey to becoming an author? Was it something you always wanted to do?
Yeah, I was always a storyteller. As a kid, I was a big reader, and I had this thing where if I saw a movie or I read a book that I loved, it was my kind of early development as a writer was fan fiction. I would rewrite the story, but I would create a character that I felt represented me, so it would always be, I would want to be the hero. I would want to be, the strong, you know, character, because I didn't feel that way in real life. So I was shy. I'm still, a very introverted person. I'm still kind of a shy person. So I think creating this version of myself in stories that I loved kind of created this, early look at writing characters that inspired me, I guess, so to speak. So yeah, I always loved to tell stories and was always making stuff up and going to the library, and I'd be interested in something, so I would want to read everything on the subject, you know what I mean? And so I think that that's pretty much where it came from.
Mm-hmm. And something that, of course, you're known for is drawing on your Cree heritage and crafting your stories. And your books address a lot of aspects of Indigenous life, whether in the past or in the present. What do you hope that readers take away from reading your books in terms of having kind of a fuller picture of Indigenous life, Indigenous communities?
I I struggle to answer that because I think there are so many amazing Indigenous authors out there right now. And there are some authors that I am always drawn to. If a new book comes out, I want to read it, like Dave Robertson, Danielle Daniel, Monique Gray Smith, Richard Van Camp. I always gravitate towards those books. And I only, not in that long ago past, I thought, I know there are new voices and new stories and new people telling their versions of stories, and how important it is for me to seek out other writers that I'm not familiar with, instead of just sort of relying on that. So I think, to sort of answer your question, I think that there are so many stories and so many wonderful authors telling them, that I always just encourage readers to look further, read more, seek out more, amazing writers and more stories, because I always said that it was really important that kids see themselves in the pages of a book. And when you look at Indigenous stories or stories really about anybody, our stories are so varied, right? So even stories that I tell are not going to be the same as stories that somebody else tells that could be about the same subject. So I think it's so important when there's so many wonderful books, especially in Canada. We've got such an amazing wealth of incredible Indigenous storytellers that I think you do yourself a disservice if you do not seek out the different points of view and the different stories.
Right.
So it's a weird way of answering the question, but I always say that it's like I'm not great at promoting myself. You know, if anybody looks at my social media, I don't talk about my books that much. You know, it's not something I'm that comfortable with, but I love promoting other people. So I think my go-to is always to say, well, you know, thanks, but here's some great books that you could read. So I think that that's kind of how I answer this as well, of, you know, that everybody's experience is so different, that reading a great wealth of stories and storytellers is an amazing way really to learn more. And yeah, such a weird way to answer, but
no,
that's just me.
That's a great answer, because I think you're getting to the heart of this issue about a lot of times diversity can be kind of superficial. Like you have a list of diverse books and make sure and have one by a Native author, when what you're talking about is that the experiences are so varied that there's so many different authors telling so many different stories. And even in your own work, I mean, the kinds of stories that you tell are really so varied. I mean, I mentioned Just Lucky, which is about a girl who, for different reasons ends up in the foster system.
Yeah.
And, you know, versus talking about something about residential schools. I mean,
Right.
you know, they're just these really different experiences. And just got a really nice comment. Love everything Melanie's written. Can't wait to get the next one and the one after that and the one after that, which we will get to, because I know you have other books coming out that I want to make sure we talk about. But something I was really interested in is that you really don't shy away from talking about difficult topics in your books, whether, like I just mentioned, talking about foster system, foster care system. You also talk about residential schools and MMIW. And you said that when it comes to talking about painful subjects with children, that we often don't give them enough credit,
Right,
as far as what they can handle. And yet, how do you find a way to tell these stories age appropriate? That must be a really difficult balance to strike.
I mean, I think it is key as a children's author that you do not speak down to your audience. And I think that that's a big challenge, that you appreciate that they can grasp complex subjects, but you do have to make it age appropriate, you know? And I don't know, it's just, I kind of feel like in picture books, I don't know, I just kind of can tell it. Oh, God, I am not good at talking about myself. But okay, so I have a book coming out next year, the year after, at some point. I have a book coming out, and it delves into the relationship between a boy and his grandfather who has dementia. And my grandmother had Alzheimer's, so I've dealt with that personally, and it is a tricky subject. There's no happy ending for it. You know, there's no cure. It is a progressive disease. But I wanted to tell this story about this relationship between them and the connection they have, and what connects them is music. And music's something that's, you know, really, I'm literally sitting beside my record player right now, if I don't hear listening. But so that was a tough one as well, because how do you talk about things that kids are going to deal with? Kids have aging family members. Kids deal with, you know, issues of mental illness, and parents with depression and their own depression, and bringing these things, whether it's trauma in the past or things that they're dealing with now. Like Lucky in foster care dealt with a lot of trauma. She deals with losing people close to her. She deals with, you know, being assaulted. She deals with all these things. And even when you're in YA, it's a little easier because you can talk about that. In picture books, there are ways to do it that respect how gentle children are and what their needs are. I can't tell you how to do it because I don't know. I just, I always find it's such a weird thing to say, but whenever I teach writing classes, I say this, that when I'm really struggling and the words aren't coming and I can't get words down on paper, I know that the story's not good. But when I sit down and I'm like, bam, the story's flying out of me, I know it's going to be good. And not to say that in an arrogant way, but I just know that what I'm writing is working because I'm not struggling with it. When I struggle with it, it's not good and it needs a lot of work. But when the story's there and it's something I need to tell and it's coming out of me super easy, I know that it's going to be good. And with the picture books that I've written, you know, the ones that do well are the ones that came easily. And I don't know why I'm able to tell things in a way that's age appropriate and gently. I don't know. I don't know. I wish I could share how that works, but I just kind of, you know, I like kids a lot. I have kids. I work with kids, and I've always had an appreciation for the fact that the things they go through, the struggles they have, are no less than the struggles we have as adults. Just because they're small doesn't mean that their problems are small. You know what I mean? And so I think that I have a healthy respect for children and what they're able to process. And I'm very good at listening. And I think that that has served me well as a children's author.
Right. And I love that you do talk about these difficult issues, but at the same time you talk about joy. Like in your recent book that came out, Benjamin's Thunderstorm. Can you tell us about that one and what inspired that story?
My kids. I mean, it was simple because anybody who is a parent or is adjacent to kids or is a caregiver to kids, kids love the rain.
Right.
Okay, not every kid, I'm sure, but I mean, my kids loved going outside and dancing in the rain, and that was something that we used to do. I mean, me as a grown-up, them as kids, we would go out and dance around in the rain, and we like made a song about it. We danced around, and it was great fun. And so when I was, you know, I have a reputation, or I did have a reputation for a long time, that I wrote very dark subjects.
Right.
I'm not a dark person. I like to think I'm kind of funny, you know. I mean, maybe I'm not, but I like to think I'm funny. But I'm, you know, I don't feel that I'm a very dark person. And it became apparent to me that that was all I was doing. And it didn't represent who I am and what I wanted to do. And I really wanted to just tell a fun story that was joyful and happy. And what was more joyful than a kid dancing in the rain? And I liked the fact that this kid switches very effortlessly between the two languages that he speaks. I liked the idea of that this is just who he is. Right. You know, it's literally a moment in time. There's no progression of, you know, of what they say to do in a plot. It's literally just him having a good time dancing in the rain and what it reminds him of. And he loves thunder, but he hates lightning, you know, and just this moment of this child's life, I thought was just so fun. And again, it just, for some reason, was easy to tell and easy to make it as joyful, I feel like, as it was in my head. And I think I credit the illustrator, because the illustrations are gorgeous. The illustrations are everything in this story. It's so beautiful. I, of course, I have copies, but they're on the other side of the studio, so I don't have one to hold up. But yeah, I think that illustration is key here. Of the illustrations are beautiful and colorful and joyous and so evocative of who this child actually is. You know, they're in. I have to grab one. Hang on a second.
It is. I've seen it in your feed, so it's worth getting because they are such beautiful and, like you said, just so vibrant and so joyful.
Like it's so incredible, and it's better than I ever could have imagined. And you know, it's just like, look at this kid. They're just, the illustrations are absolutely gorgeous, and they're by a wonderful artist named Hawlii Pichette. And honestly, I think the illustrations make the book. Like, I'm happy and proud to have written it, but this would not be the same book without Hawlii's illustrations, for sure.
Well, speaking of writing, that you are such a prolific writer. I mean, I was just amazed at how many books you've done, and then you have, I don't even know how many that are coming out in the next year or two. What's your writing process like? I mean, you've talked about it a little bit, but do you focus on one book at a time? Do you have several projects happening at once, or how does that work?
I'm ashamed. I hate this question because, you know, you talk to somebody like Kenneth Opel who'll be like, "Oh yeah, I lock myself in my studio every day for like 4 hours." That is not me. I cannot force it. I wish I could write every day. I don't. You said I was prolific, and I think I was. And then there was a 3-year period where the world kind of, you know, exploded, and I didn't work. I didn't write. I had no creativity whatsoever. Happily, I have, you know, been writing again. I've got 8 books coming out in the next couple of years, and I'm really proud of what I've done. But I'm not somebody who can force it, and I'm not somebody who has a strict writing practice. I wish I was. I'd be more prolific if I was, but I am, you know, I spend a lot of time on TikTok, and I spend a lot of time on YouTube, just doing stupid things when I should be working. So my practice is to put off the process as long as humanly possible, be really lazy, and go work out and do like everything I can possibly do to avoid working. You know, I've got deadlines, and I'm ignoring them right now. My editors should never see this because I'm lazy that way. But, you know, my process is just to wait until I'm kind of hit and I'm like, okay, I'm ready. I can do this, you know, because I'm not good at just sitting down and getting words on the page. Some people can do that and they can make sense of it later, but I'm not one of them. It has to be, I'm inspired, and I'm ready, and I have this story that needs to be told. Otherwise, it's just not good work, and it's not even work that I can fix later a lot of the time. So my process is to wait, and you know, it's awful. It's awful. I'm the worst person to
No, but I
interview.
love this because I think there's some people who think that they have to be like kind of the model that you mentioned, where you are very disciplined about it. And well, not necessarily. You've been very successful, so it must work for you. And that was something I was kind of interested in, because you did mention it. You do a lot of fun stuff on social media, like you've said. And one of them was a TikTok about not looking like what people expect as an author. And I was curious because I know you do a lot of author visits. So how do children react to you when they see you? And what value is it when they see somebody who they wouldn't expect? It's not your stereotypical author. I mean, how does that kind of encourage them maybe to think, oh, well, I could do this too?
It's that, okay. It sounds so, look, social media is not something I'm comfortable with. Like I said, I don't like promoting my own work. So I try to be funny, or I talk about music, because I'm really, you know, music is something that if I'm stuck, I come out here, my dogs are out here sleeping. I have like a million records, and I put music on, and I you know, so yeah, it's weird to me that has been happening to me for so long, where I would get told, you don't look like a children's author. And I always just thought it was funny. And then 3 years go by where I didn't visit a school. And then all of a sudden I went back into schools, you know, older. And I was surprised that immediately I started hearing it again. And I just thought it was so funny. So I want to do a whole series about it because it just amuses me so much. I get, kids will come up to me, and funny enough, it's like the grade 8s and a lot of the older ones who are like, "Are you the author?" I'm like, "Yeah." Like, "You don't look like an author." And I kind of laugh because this happened to me just recently, and I went, "So what does an author, like, why don't I look like an author? Like, what should I?" They're like, "You're not old enough." You just, like, I live for that, believe me, because I am old enough. But I mean, it's funny because kids in particular, and they think children's authors are elderly and not cool for the most part. And, you know, I should have gray hair and glasses and dress. Well, I'm wearing flannel today, so maybe like this actually, but like dress very conservatively. And I don't. I have, you know, I'm covered up now, but I've got tattoos, and I'm, you know, I wear, I mean, I've got ripped jeans on, or I've got like leather pants or so. Oh God, it's so cringy now, but I mean, it's funny because I'm at the age now where I wear what I want, you know what I mean? And I wear what makes me comfortable and makes me happy, but I get a lot of compliments. It's a lot of fun to kind of go in. And then the first thing I do is start talking to them about the importance of storytelling and where we find stories. Because, you know, I used to ask kids, who here likes to read? Who likes books? And I think it does such a disservice to kids when you do that, because not every kid likes to read. Not every kid, you know, is a comfortable and confident reader, and not every kid has found the book that resonates with them. So, you know, talking to them about other places we find stories, and it inevitably devolves into, and I say devolve because the teachers are always looking at me because I spend too long talking about comic books, because I'm a big comic book fan. So we get into an argument about DC versus Marvel, and like we talk about how I started enjoying comic books and how that's a valid way to find stories, graphic novels, you know, and video games. And that just kills the teachers because they hate that I do that. But then we talk about specific video games that I play and they play, and all of a sudden it just turns into this free-for-all. And I think also it helps, you know, of them not to think of me like you can't be an author, you don't look like an author, but it's also that I'm talking about video games and comic books that we both enjoy. So, you know, it's I just spent 10 minutes talking to you trying to defend myself from that, but yeah.
No, that's great. So it's like breaking down these barriers that kids have, and also about thinking about themselves as readers and storytellers. If they're not thinking about it just in that traditional way, but like you said, there's so many places where we find stories, which I think is so wonderful to encourage kids about that. And speaking of stories, we're coming up on time, and I want to make sure you have time to talk about the books that you have coming out. I know one is Kaiah's Garden that's coming out next year, but you have others. Can you tell us about that?
Okay. Kaiah's Garden is a picture book, and it's about I write a lot, you'll notice, about kids and their grandparents. And, you know, it's not deliberate. I don't know how this happened. I was very close to specifically my grandfather. So I think that is just where it comes from, but it is a recurring theme.
Right.
And it is the same with Kaiah. It's about a girl who moves to a new town and a new home. And she misses the old one because the old one was colorful. There was a garden, and it was home. It smelled like home. It felt like home. It sounded like home. And she goes out and looks at this garden, and it's not home. There's no color there. So she remembers that her grandmother, you know, is one of the people that added color to her life, essentially. So, you know, there's no apples growing in the tree, so she beads one. She makes one out of beads. And, you know, the same thing, there's none of the purple flowers that were at her old home, so she makes them. And it's just sort of creating a new home for herself. It's a cool picture book. Again, it's different. It's not, well, okay, it's a little bit sad, but it's not sad as a whole. I have the picture book that I mentioned about the little boy who has a grandfather with Alzheimer's. And it, you know, I've started to really rely on things that I'm passionate about as inspiration for stories. And this was about music. And if I turn around here, okay, I can't turn around because I'm on, oh my gosh, I can't see if I'm over here, but my guitars are over there.
Yes.
And okay, so music is something that is really important to me. And so it's about a little boy who wants to learn how to play guitar, and it's not easy. You know, I play guitar, it's not an easy thing to learn. And so he tries eyes, and he immediately is like, I can't do it, I can't do it. And his grandfather tells him, you know, if it was easy, everybody would do it. So he practices and he practices. And it's really about this connection that he shares with his grandfather. And the connection is music. It's something that simple, but it's something that even as his grandfather, you know, dealing with the disease of, you know, declining mental health, it's still something that connects them. So it was really important to me to write that. And then I have a novel coming out, a middle grade novel comes out early next year that I'm really, really excited about. And it's called Lo Simpson Starts a Revolution, which is a lot of words, but it's a really cool story about a girl who doesn't want to grow up, and which was me, which was my daughter, but her best friend, who was like a sister to her, her partner and everything, does. And she kind of goes off with the popular girls, and she's left to sort of figure out who she is without her friend. And, you know, it is dealing with all the things that girls of 11 and 12 and 13 deal with, but we don't see in a lot of books. So we're talking about puberty and buying your first bra and how horrifying that is when you're not ready for it. And, you know, periods. There's a lot of books, you know, about growing up, and we don't like to talk about it, but it's essential that we do talk about these subjects because it happens to everybody. Well, it happens to, you know, to a lot of people, and addressing the fact that it's not just a feminine issue. You know, it deals with, you know, the fact that gender is fluid. It talks about different, how supplies should be in all bathrooms available to everybody, how supplies should be given by schools and aren't, and just things like that, you know. And this girl who never really had a voice because she was shy, you know, she learns to speak up. She learns to fight back against a school that, you know, is handing out condoms to the boys in their health section, but to the girls and, you know, everybody who needs pads and other supplies, they're not handed out. They're just expected to be there. And so Lo speaks up, and, you know, it's a weird story because I get to delve into my love of Doctor Who, which is well known and well documented. And instead, she doesn't have a friend right now, so she doesn't write in a diary. She writes letters to the doctor, not the actor, but the actual doctor, and just, you know, kind of gets strength from the idea that this person actually exists, and Lo wants to be just like them. So, you know, and it was actually a learning experience for me writing this, because I did write things like the girls' bathroom, feminine products, and I became aware, of course, that that's not appropriate language, and it's important that we understand how important language actually is, and how inclusive we need to be, and how sensitive we need to be about subjects of, you know, gender and sexuality and all of these things. So, you know, it was great for me to sort of sit down and say, okay, well, actually, I can't say this. That's not an appropriate thing to say. And you know, inclusiveness is vital. And acceptance is vital.
Right.
And, you know, I think the younger generation knows this more than us. You know what I mean? So, but yeah.
I think it seems to come to them much more intuitively.
Yeah.
Kind of matter of factly than I think it does for the rest of us. And I love that you are including it in your book, and I can't wait to see them come out. You said that one is coming out next year?
It's early next year. They just gave me the date, and I don't remember it, of course, because I have a terrible memory, but it's soon. It's right around the time Kaiah comes out.
Well, we will keep an eye out for that. And thank you for taking the time to talk with us today. It was so much fun to talk with you. I really enjoy your books. And thanks to everybody who's watching. If you joined us late, this will be up in just a few minutes on Instagram, and then later we'll have it on our YouTube channel. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much.